thousands, in the millions, and we will be. Because it starts right here.
Guilty.
Happy Black August and welcome to Naptown People's Radio, a weekly podcast of the Indianapolis branch of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm your host, Danny Abdullah, and I'm here with my comrade and co-host,
Derek Ford.
We're here to guide you through pressing issues facing Indianapolis from the perspective of our people, not our oppressors. And as organizers involved in these issues, we're not just talking about the news, we're making it happen. So on this episode, we're going to be interviewing William Wagner, one of the organizers for the recent car caravan to Camp Atterbury last Friday. So if you're not familiar with Camp Atterbury, it is a training site here in Indiana. It's actually in Edinburgh, and it's used by the Army Reserve and Indiana National Guard, and is now being co-opted by the Indiana Department of Homeland Security and Indiana Immigration and Customs Enforcement to detain immigrants under Braun's new quote-unquote partnership agreements, meeting the needs of the Trump administration's racist and anti-immigrant agenda. So before they fully converted Camp Atterbury into a concentration camp, the Indiana National Guard and Army Reserve used the space to experiment with new weapons that they will be using against the people. Isn't that amazing? That's so great. But before we get into that, let's get into the Naptown breakdown. So what do you got for us today, Derek?
Well, I think first, Decatur, Indiana just had their first Pride Parade, despite a month of backlash and threats. So, after the Pride Committee applied to host the event in downtown Decatur, they were immediately met with opposition. And at the city council meeting, when the application was discussed, the room was packed. And those, who were speaking against it were in the minority, right? Most people in the room were in favor of the festival and even talked about how repression causes more harm than good. And, most importantly, after a month of this organized opposition, they still boldly carried out their first Pride event. And it was a huge success. Over 1,000 people showed up, and that's a tenth of the population, which clearly shows the bigots that they are in the minority. We're not afraid of them, and that when the people band together, we can make anything happen. So, when any reactionary forces, politicians, religious groups, or whatever speak out against the queer community, you can expect them to stand up and fight back. Speaking of people fighting back, the struggle against the new Google data center and AES Indiana continues heating up. So, as a reminder, AES Indiana is asking for increased residential rates to basically offset or totally compensate for the portion of the data center that they have to pay for. The utility company has a complete monopoly on electricity in Marion County, and at an August 6th town hall hosted by the Citizens Action Coalition, about 30 to 40 residents were present, and CAC's program director, Ben Inskeep, explained that AES already has the highest fixed customer charge in Indiana and is now proposing the steepest increases for residential customers, while offering significantly smaller hikes for commercial and industrial users. Quote, "That's a political choice," quote, he said. "This increase is a direct consequence of policy decisions that prioritize corporate profit over public need." Reporters from the Indianapolis Liberator were at the meeting, and afterwards they spoke to a neighbor named Darcy, who gave a firsthand account of the crisis that so many of us are facing. So when Darcy's furnace failed during the winter, she had to rely on space heaters to get through the cold. Her electric bill skyrocketed to nearly $500. And then in the spring, her car was damaged in a flood, so she had to take costly Uber rides to work. And with income stretched so thin and no relief available, she prioritized her mortgage and car repairs. By May, AES disconnected her power and refused to turn it back on unless she paid over $2,000 in full. And then she said, quote, "They give corporations tax breaks while we get the shutoffs," end quote. Darcy's story is not an anomaly, and it really shows that our people see what's going on. They're not fooled. We aren't stupid. So until September 2nd, CAC is collecting and submitting public comments to the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor, and you can do the same through our show notes. Let's speak with one voice. No price hikes, no data centers, energy for the people and planet, not corporations. So that's it for this segment. We'll be right back after a short break.
This is Destiny Glover, and I've had the honor of serving as the General Coordinator for the Indianapolis Liberation Center, working with victims of IMPD violence like Jada Traynor and the family of Adam Sykes. Recently, I've been working alongside ILC volunteers to fight against the unjust repression of immigrants here in Indy. I just returned from Camp Atterbury, where we led a car caravan of volunteers to protest against the use of the military grounds as a detention center. It's an honor to be amongst the groups that make up the Indianapolis Liberation Center, our city's liberated space where working, poor, and oppressed communities unite to build collective power. Located at 18th and Meridian Street, the Indianapolis Liberation Center is rooted in a fundamental truth. Liberation is never given by the oppressor. It is won through organized, united struggle. Unity is never simple, so we actively bridge the divides imposed on us by the ruling class through education, culture, politics, spirituality, and more. We reject competition and embrace cooperation, bringing together community members, organizers, and others to train a new generation of activists. Together, we're fighting for a world built on the interest of the people and the planet. By organizing across our city, we're reviving a collective spirit and renewing our belief in a better, necessary future. This work is hard, and it's not free. We depend on supporters like you to keep the center open and growing. Visit indyliberationcenter.org to learn more, donate, sign up for our weekly newsletter, and get involved today. Your support ensures this liberated space thrives, opening new avenues in the struggle for liberation. Thank you for your support. And now back to Naptown People's Radio.
And we're back at Naptown People's Radio. We're honored to be joined by William Wagner, a lifelong Hoosier, the son of immigrants, and also one of the lead organizers of Friday's car caravan protest at Camp Atterbury. Welcome to the show, William.
Thanks for having me on.
So I wanted to talk to you about this demonstration because first, I think a lot of people probably don't know what Camp Atterbury is. Can you tell us?
So conventionally, it is a large training grounds about 45 minutes drive south of Indy, where the Army Reserve and Indiana National Guard do training operations. It can be boot camp, it can be just different military exercises and the like.
What is the connection between ICE and the war on immigrants and Camp Atterbury?
So I think one thing that people probably don't know is that Camp Atterbury, since its opening in 1942, has been a staging ground for redispersing refugees back across the country. So, for example, after the Japanese internment camps were shut down, some families were relocated to Camp Atterbury for temporary housing until they could find their own shelter elsewhere. This also happened after the Vietnam War, and most recently, at least I think most recently, with Afghan refugees. Afghan families were given temporary housing at Camp Atterbury in 2021.
Wow, that's interesting. I did not know that. And is now as the war against immigrants escalates, are there plans to house, quote unquote, house, in other words, imprison immigrants at Camp Atterbury, or use it as a transport post, or what exactly is the relationship there?
It's a little hard to tell what exactly ICE's plans are for Camp Atterbury and the Miami Correctional Facility, which they're nicknaming the Speedway Slammer. At most, we know that both of these facilities are going to be utilized as temporary detention centers for ICE. They're going to provide up to 1,000 beds each at both of these facilities. But as much of an opaque operation as ICE is, we don't really know what the conditions of these detention centers are going to be. And we've already seen from insider reports and leaked footage reports from human rights groups that a lot of these detention centers that are being used are completely overcrowded. The detainees are being neglected for medical attention and being subjected to humiliating treatment. So we can, I'm sure, expect a lot of the same kind of inhumanity at both of these places.
Yeah, and it also seems to me that it really blurs a line between like the military and the police, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that the orders of military personnel at Camp Atterbury will be to do, rotations of guard duty, essentially.
Right. Yeah, we often, hear about and talk about the militarization of the police, but this is the policification of the military. And I'm wondering, why did you choose to protest at Camp Atterbury on Friday, August 15th in particular?
Yeah, there was some debate about whether to hold it on that Saturday when we might have gotten a bit more traffic. But our unit wanted to call attention to an event that was happening at Camp Atterbury on the 15th, which was the last day of a biannual technology expo titled T-Rex for Technology Readiness Expo, which is essentially a showcase of different prototype defense technologies or defense technologies in the prototype stage. And this year, there was a huge focus on drones and the newest toys in drone warfare.
Okay. And I mean, so that's, I think, quite important. And it's also an important sort of escalation in the resistance to ICE because, there have been, I think historically large demonstrations, for example, outside of, Gamebridge Fieldhouse earlier this year. And those are incredibly important, and there's been, emergency demonstrations after the, basically ICE abduction of 2 Honduran men, workers, fellow workers, months before that. Mm-hmm. But it's, it's one thing to have a protest, and it's another thing to go to a military base and have a protest there right outside of the military base. So I'm wondering. So one, I salute you for that. That's really, it's a courageous thing to do.
Thank you.
And one, I'm wondering, was there any extra surveillance on you, or how were you received?
We definitely had a welcoming party. When we pulled up around the bend onto the section of Old Hospital Road between Edinburgh and Prince Lake, Indiana, where Camp Atterbury resides, or the main gates are, there were different police cars that were waiting for us, and we even had some men in uniform just past the gates that were waiting for us, basically just monitoring us the whole time to make sure things didn't get out of hand. At one point, there was even a helicopter tailing us, which is completely unnecessary and a complete, waste of fuel and resources for people that have no intention of, storming the gates. 30 of us trying to, siege the whole military base. Ridiculous.
Yeah, it's obviously, their intention is clearly, like, they don't think that, right? I mean, I think they're smarter than that. But they're really just trying to like intimidate you from doing this and from even being there, right? Maybe we get them to turn around and go home earlier if we, show our force. But really, what does it tell you? Like the fact that because you said you had, a couple dozen of people, mm-hmm. that they were so afraid of a couple dozen people that they would deploy a helicopter and armed guards and divert them away from the usual activities just to try to, quote unquote, protect the base and also just, intimidate you. I mean, I think that says something that really speaks to our power that we don't even realize that we have.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised myself. I wasn't expecting that kind of reception, if at all. And honestly, it was empowering to see that my desire to make my opinions known, even to the faceless entity that is a police department or the defense department, could elicit that kind of response.
Yeah, and the other thing too is obviously immigration is an international issue by the very fact of the crossing of borders. And of course, we're all like members of one international class, right? And the drones, that are being tested at T-Rex this year or whatever, those are the same drones that are going to be, that the U.S. is using to murder people in Palestine.
Absolutely.
And in Ukraine, and how many countries in Africa, right? Like 8, 9, there's so many. So it's really, I think, an important act that, that goes beyond just the issue of immigration in Indianapolis or Indiana and really speaks to a protest against really the U.S. domination of the globe.
Yeah, I fully expect the tools of war that are used abroad to be turned inward against who the administration considers to be dissidents, which is a bit frightening, but we have to keep pushing on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, William, for joining the show. And again, I really salute you because it's, like I said, it's no small thing to go up, especially with a couple dozen people, and like go right up to the military and say, hey, we're not afraid of your technology. We're not afraid of your tanks or your weapons or whatever these corporations are coming up with. But the important thing is that you set an example. And so now other people also won't be afraid, right? Because you've shown, we've done it before, and they were actually scared of us. And so next time we can come with 100 people. And so I'm sure that our listeners, listening to this will and hope that they'll be taking that into consideration, because it's clear that the war, and it is now, now that it's linked with the actual military encampment that's doing war exercises, which the whole point of exercising and practicing is to if you're practicing basketball, it's to play basketball, right? So these are war exercises for a war, and so there's literally a war on immigrants. And so we're obviously going to have to, escalate our resistance to that war. And so I thank you for your work and for it's been great having you on the show and talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Recognize the revolution. Recognize the revolution. Recognize the revolution.
Okay, and we're back with Naptown People's Radio. Our Circle City shout out for this week goes to Indiana Aid. We have briefly discussed Indiana Aid on the podcast before. So as a reminder, the AID in Indiana Aid stands for Assistance for Immigrants in Detention. So this is the perfect episode to be talking about Indiana Aid for sure. Talking about Black August and its revolutionary roots to shed light on the atrocities that happen to the most vulnerable members of our society, prisoners, and especially shining light on political prisoners, the work that Indiana Aid does is essential and necessary. Indiana Aid is a volunteer group that supports individuals detained by ICE in Indiana by visiting them, bearing witness to their experiences, and providing resources to them and their families. They also facilitate connections between immigrants and various service providers in the region, which is the Chicagoland region. So that would be, of course, Chicago, other parts of Illinois, and most of Indiana as well, if you didn't know that. They also provide commissary support so that the people detained there can buy food and medicine, and offer general updates to the public about developments in immigration detention in our state. Comrades in PSL and comrades in Answer have worked with Indiana Aid in the past, and I can say it's always a dope experience. I have learned so much from just having a conversation with the people and the volunteers in Indiana Aid related to our immigrant neighbors and how they're violated in this state just by existing, essentially. So if you're interested in becoming a volunteer or signing up for their trainings, or you have questions or concerns, you can hit them up. Their number is 317-721-4044, and you can leave a voicemail. It might take a few days for them to get back to you because, again, volunteers. So that's okay. We're all working class. You can also email them at indianaaidcontact@gmail.com, and we will put all of that information in our show notes.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Danny. I mean, Indiana Aid is actually one of the first groups that reached out to us after we started the new Liberation Center in October of 2023, and we've been, really honored to build with them. They've been doing the work, without the fanfare, even during the Biden administration, and we continue to learn a lot from them. And I personally have really valued our relationship. And we've got several events coming up this week too, as we finish out Black August. On Saturday, August 23rd, from 1 to 3 p.m., there's going to be an event that will really show how Black August is a global event, a day for internationalism. So our comrade Anamika Krishnan, who's from Kerala, is going to be leading a workshop on how both the U.S. and India use prisons as weapons against dissent, jailing revolutionaries, silencing movements, and protecting the interests of the ruling class. And then later on that day, there's going to be a community-led discussion on police violence and the fight for justice at 6 p.m. This will take place at Hovey Street Church of Christ. It's organized by PSL Indianapolis, and it's going to be led by those who have been directly impacted by IMPD terror, including Kim Gray, who's the mother of Eric Taylor, Nikki Schumpert, the mother of Adam Sykes, the first person the IMPD killed this year, as well as Jada Traynor, a military veteran who was brutalized by police at Eskenazi Hospital. They're going to be sharing their stories, demanding accountability, and this event is going to be crucial as we continue moving Black August forward. And the following day, this is Sunday, August 24th, from 1 to 3, at the Liberation Center, the PSL Indianapolis will be hosting the second part of their book study of Socialist Reconstruction. They'll be focusing on chapters 6 through 10, but no pre-reading is required. Everybody is welcome. And then we have our special Black August Liberation Forum, which is called Until Victory, Black August from the U.S. to the Sahel. This is a monthly event that PSL Indianapolis puts on. It'll be at the Liberation Center Wednesday, August 27th at 6 p.m. And we are really honored to be joined by guest speaker Haki Kweli Shakur. He's a new African historian and deeply engaged in the national liberation struggles. Most notably is a national spokesperson for the August 3rd Collective, which is a cadre organization of the New African Independence Movement, which was founded by Sanyika Shakur, also known as Monster Cody, who was his mentor, as well as other New African political prisoners. I can tell you that Haki Kweli Shakur, he's got to write a book of his own. This man is so intelligent and also so deeply involved in the struggle. So we've got a packed agenda, and we hope to see you at all or some of the events. And that'll do it for this episode of Naptown People's Radio. If you found today's discussion useful, pass it on, leave a comment, and listen for our next episode to drop. Please support us at support.pslindianapolis.org and by shopping at our Liberation Center store at indyliberationcenter.org/store. If you have a suggestion for the show, you can email us at producer@Naptown People's Radio and speak to our producer, Dakota. The road ahead is long, but we walk it together. Study with your comrades, build with your community, and always remember, theory without action is paralysis, but action without theory is chaos. Stay dangerous, stay disciplined, and stay in the struggle.
We trying to create a movement. We got a chance to do something in Indiana that brothers like myself been talking about for the last 40 years. When I first became political and we was organized behind the walls in the 80s and 90s, some of the stuff that we doing now with the different programs and the different institutions that we have and things like the Indy Center is things that we used to talk about and dream about doing. And now we doing them. See what I'm saying? We doing it. And we got to keep that momentum going. And it's also generation. So as the next generation come up, you know what I'm saying? It's on y'all to take it to the next level and take it to the next stage.
Salute.